Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're stepping into a world that is equal parts fascinating and, quite frankly, absolutely terrifying as we unpack the chilling folklore of rural India. But listen, we aren't just here to tell spooky campfire stories today. No way. We're going to break down the actual underlying anatomy of these legends. We're looking at the recurring tropes, the structure, and most importantly, the hidden societal truths buried deep within these tales. So get comfortable, because we are about to unveil the anatomy of a legend. शमशान की मिट्टी इतनी ठंडी क्यों होती है? Why is the cremation ground's earth so cold? Literally, just think about that for a second. Even when the funeral pyres are burning 24 hours a day, the earth itself remains icy to the touch. This is the exact question our source material, Masaan Qissa, uses to pull us right into the atmosphere of the rural cremation ground, the Massan. It's a place where, according to the lore, the dead don't just burn. They wait, they linger, they're holding on to something unresolved. It's such a brilliant narrative hook, right? Because it immediately shifts our expectations from this place of final rest to a place of restless, creeping anticipation.
Section 1. गांव की भयानक चेतावनियां. The village's terrifying warnings.
You know how every good piece of rural folklore relies on a foundational pillar to set the stakes, right? It's always that ominous warning from a village elder. Take the story of Samir. He's a city boy visiting the remote Chaandi-pur village, and his Dadaji sits him down and delivers this exact quote. Beta, रात को मसान वाले रास्ते से मत गुजरना, क्योंकि वहाँ Nishir Molo घूमते हैं. Son, never take the Massan road at night, because that's where the Nishir Molo roam. This establishes a sacred boundary. Samir, of course, brushes it off, but we all know this warning is the tripwire for the entire narrative. Now, what's really wild here is the hyper-specific imagery used to describe this threat. The Nishir Molo aren't just your generic, formless spirits floating around. No, they are four distinct supernatural entities that endlessly roam the night, carrying an old, violently creaking wooden coffin on their shoulders. It's not just a ghost, it's a literal procession of the dead just waiting for you on a forbidden road. And this brilliantly illustrates how this storytelling trope completely transcends any single tale. Let's look at our second source, the Midnight Lesson of the Master Ji, to see how this builds. Here, we have a brand new teacher arriving in a totally different village, and they receive a parallel warning from a different elder. Quote, never ring the school bell after the sun sets, for the Master Ji still expects his students to arrive at midnight. It's a different setting, different ghosts, but it's the exact same structural mechanic. The elder establishes the taboo, the boundary is drawn. Section 2. Samir and Nishir Molo, the encounter at the banyan tree. Of course, you can't have a legend without someone actually testing those boundaries. So what happens when Samir inevitably breaks his grandfather's taboo? The atmosphere the source builds here is incredibly deliberate. Picture this. It's exactly 1 a.m. There is a dense, suffocating fog all around, and there's an ancient banyan tree with roots made of actual human hair. Just imagine standing there in the dark, hearing sudden, heavy breathing, and then the sharp, terrifyingly normal sound of a bicycle bell. Dring, dring, ringing out in the dead of night. So Samir turns around, and his absolute worst nightmare is realized. The Nishir Molo are approaching, and the folklore methodically builds the dread here. First, it's the auditory horror. You hear these heavy, perfectly synchronized footsteps. Thud, thud, thud. Then comes the rhythmic, hypnotic chanting. Bum bum bosh, bum bum bosh. The four figures draw closer, the tension reaches its absolute peak, and then that old wooden coffin on their shoulders slowly begins to creak open. The taboo has been broken, and the supernatural consequence has officially arrived. Section 3. Masterji ki Adhi Raat. The mistake at the school. The thing about folklore, though, is that it's highly versatile. You don't always have to go actively looking for ghosts to trigger the trap. In our second source, the new teacher performs a completely innocent, really empathetic action. They just spot a lost dog wandering the school grounds after sunset, and they accidentally ring the school bell to call it over. But in the mechanics of rural folklore, your intent doesn't matter at all. Breaking the rule does. And just like that, the trap is instantly triggered.
The consequence is immediate, and it is horrifying. The teacher suddenly finds themselves completely trapped inside a pitch-black classroom, but they aren't alone in there. They are surrounded by the charred, silent figures of children. The Master G's midnight class is convened. It's a terrifying visual, right? It feels like a massive punishment for a seemingly harmless mistake. But we have to ask, why? Why are these spirits so restless? Why do they trap this innocent teacher, and why on earth did the Nishir Molo reveal their coffin to Samir?
Section 4. Asli Gunahgar Kaun. Unmasking the real culprits.
All right, so what does this all mean? This is where the explainer gets truly fascinating, because we can pull back the curtain to see a 4-step narrative formula perfectly dissecting the anatomy of a legend. Step 1, the warning is issued. Step 2, the taboo is broken. Step 3, the supernatural encounter occurs. But it's step 4 that is the real beating heart of these stories, the tragic truth revealed. You see, these narratives use the supernatural as a vehicle to lead us directly to a hidden historical tragedy. If we look at the facts revealed in both of our sources impartially, a very clear pattern emerges. On side A, the coffin reveals that an innocent tantrik was actually sacrificed by the village's own greedy Mukhiya. On side B, those charred children? They were victims burned alive in a fire deliberately set by a corrupt local landlord decades ago. The ghosts aren't the villains here. Not at all. They are victims of immense historical injustice. And the source material for the Masaan Qissa gives us the specific, undeniable evidence. When that creaking coffin opened for Samir, a ghost didn't jump out to attack him. Instead, he found a letter, an actual death note that exposed exactly what happened. The Mukhiya committed this horrific murder out of sheer greed, attempting to harvest Mrityunjay Amrit, these mythical drops of immortality that are said to fall from that very banyan tree on a full moon. All the supernatural elements we saw, the hair roots, the coffin, the chants, they were literally just a loud, terrifying alarm bell, ringing to draw attention to this very human crime.
Section 5, Harkov Kadard, Becoming Vehicles for Justice.
This absolutely flips the script on what the protagonist is actually doing there. Samir and the teacher aren't just victims. They are chosen investigators. They're meant to bring the tragic backstory to light so the spirits can finally find their rest. Which brings us to the core thesis of our sources. Har khauf ke piche ek dard chupa hota hai. Behind every fear hides a pain. These legends endure because they serve as a vital oral record of societal trauma. The true monsters are never the ghosts. They are the people in power who thought they could bury their sins in the cold earth. It completely reshapes how you look at folklore, doesn't it? The next time you hear a local ghost story, look past the phantoms and ask yourself, what real-life injustice is this story trying to remember? So I'm going to leave you with one final, lingering thought from our sources. Have you ever heard the eerie bell of the Nishir Molo in the dead of night? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the stories around you, and I will see you next time as we continue to unpack the fascinating truth behind the legends.